Welcome back, everybody. I'm not going to show my face. I'm under lockdown. I can't have a haircut. It's hard to exercise, putting on weight. I'm under lock and key. I don't really want to be on camera at the moment. I just look terrible. And it is a direct result of this lockdown that we're going through. But today's video, I'm going to go through, I've got a lot to cover. But I'm going to tackle the argument, which is apparently Gladys Berejiklian and Hazard and Kerry Chant. Health advice, quote, health advice. I don't know if health advice is science advice, but we're going to tackle that. I don't have a medical background. I'm not a doctor. Just someone that uses common sense. So I'm going to tackle this today, and we got quite a lot to cover. So maybe you could put this on 1.25 speed, up to you. But to start with, this video, if you can give it a thumbs up, just so that the algorithm knows that this is a valuable video, and if you know someone that's locked up, maybe share this video with them. What it does is I like to see at least 1,000 views on each video to justify making another video. I haven't really seen that for quite a while. It's been a tough struggle to get even 1,000 views. That helps because if I'm getting enough reach, the thumbs up are making it work, you guys are sharing it around, then it justifies making more videos. So I went through and I looked at some scientific articles, and I'm going to use those today. But let's start off with making a few assumptions, okay? We have a virus that started out in China. It started spreading around the world. We live in a globalized society. My first assumption is that no matter where you are in the world, this virus is eventually going to catch you. You're gonna come in contact with it some way, somehow, under some form, no matter where you are, and you can't hide from that. I think it's important for people to understand that you can't hide from this virus. So that's my first assumption. The second assumption is the reason why I would believe that a lot of the people that would be pro-lockdown, they would own their own house, live in their own nice apartment. They're generally wealthy people that don't really need to work, or they're making money online. They've got they're working on their laptop from home. They're not necessarily affected by this. Maybe they got a gym at home. They got some form of a way that they can exercise. They don't have to worry about keeping a roof over their heads. And those people, they're pro-lockdown because they don't want to catch the virus. I totally understand that. But what they're doing simultaneously is destroying the lives of all the people who rely on work, the people that need to go outside and exercise, rely on the people that are kind of isolated and live at home alone. We're going to go through all the negative effects of that. But if you're pro-lockdown, I'm trying to reach out to you to let you know that you're doing more damage, in my opinion, and more harm over the long run than you are good. Another aspect of it is the people that, from my assumption, this could be wrong. This is my third assumption. I've got another assumption is there's a large percentage of people who are pro-lockdown, and this is connected to my first assumption that they think that they can escape this virus when they cannot. They're pro-lockdown while simultaneously being an anti-vaxxer. It is a dangerous mix. Now, if you're anti-lockdown and you want everything to just run free, and you're an anti-vaxxer, that's perfectly fine. You're just going, if you get sick, you might end up being more of a burden on the health system. But if you're pro-lockdown while being an anti-vaxxer, what you're doing is you're locking us into perpetual lockdowns for the rest of our lives just so that you can never ever face this virus or a vaccine. That's not exactly fair. That's quite selfish if you are one of those people, and I'd say that there's quite a lot of people out there that are like that. But then we go back to the first assumption. Do you believe, and this is the fundamental assumption that we need to stick with, is do you believe that you can avoid this virus forever? Let's move into another aspect of this. Flights flying in and out of Australia, because we're an island, have brought the virus into Australia, right? And it's come through our ports, cargo, shipping containers, etc. The goods that you order from abroad, they're bringing the virus into Australia. Now this cargo and these flights, they're really important. We can't shut down the cargo. So for instance, some oil gets refined in Singapore, and that ship comes to Australia. Without that fuel, you're not going to be able to drive anywhere, right? So we need those ships to be coming into Australia. A lot of those ships, they're carrying the virus. So learning to live with that is a very important thing. This is the first assumption, that you cannot escape it. I don't think you can escape this. I don't think there's any way to avoid this. And I think we need to come to terms with that. Now, I posted in my Patreon, March 2020, exactly what I'm going to talk to you guys about today, because I feel that what I'm talking about today is, it's now safe to go public with, but a lot of what I'm going to talk to you guys about today, I've already posted in my Patreon, March 2020. January 2020, I was one of the first people to break it because I had a contact in Wuhan giving me information. It seemed bad back then. Now that is not the case. Okay, so I just want to make that clear that myself, I don't think that you can escape the virus. I don't think that lockdowns work. And I don't think that if you're pro-lockdown and you're wealthy enough to lock yourself up in an ivory tower, you have the right to be an anti-vaxxer simultaneously. I think that's really unfair, because that locks us into perpetual lockdowns for the rest of our lives. The other one is those flights, international flights, and crossing state borders, locking them down is... we shouldn't be doing that. We just shouldn't be doing that, because then it feeds back into the first assumption. You think you can hide from it? Well, the thing is, the longer you hide from it, the longer you're perpetuating the drama that's going to continuously ruin your lives and the economy and the future of your children. Okay, so I just want to make those things quite clear. I think that we should just open up flights. I think that we should open up state borders, and I'm going to pitch my arguments using science today, and I think I got some good arguments here. So let's start with what is going on with our government.
The government has taken the advice of our health and police, who've worked together on presenting these to us yesterday, that we will be implementing curfews in those local government areas of concern from Monday, from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. You cannot leave your home.
Curfews, restrictions of human rights. Keep in mind, Australia has never had human rights. We don't have a proper Bill of Rights like America does. We don't have freedom of speech. That's not an over-exaggeration. That's a truth. That's a fact. And I have mentioned many times on this channel that Gladys Berejiklian has actually tried to kill me. Now, people think that that's an outrageous thing that I just say because I'm crazy. I can prove it. Now, this person does not believe in your human rights. Not one bit. She doesn't care about your jobs. She doesn't care about you, and I can prove it. But what I know about her, I can't say publicly.
Unless, of course, it's for authorised work or for emergencies. So police will be stopping everybody who's leaving their home from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. And again, this is based on police feedback we received in the last few days about the type of activity that's unfortunately being carried out by a small number of people. But as we said, Delta doesn't leave any room for error. And I apologise deeply to the vast majority of people in those communities who are so doing the right thing. But for our own health and safety moving forward, we need to make these difficult decisions.
Okay. We'll take your word for it that you care. But she's an actor. Okay? She's an actor. She doesn't care. Let's move on to the next. So we've established that there's lockdowns, curfews, restrictions of your freedoms, and her advice was based off what the police told her. So it's a police state. She's getting advice on from the police on what to do about a health matter.
Date specifically was the advice first provided to the health minister on locking down.
Well, it's not that easy, Ms. Sharp. I mean, I know you haven't been the health minister, but when you're in the middle of a COVID crisis, I spend pretty well every day here in the health building, and we discuss these issues.
Question was put to Dr. Chant, and I think it's right that we get an answer from Dr. Chant.
Well, Dr. Chant gave her answer, and can I remind you that we have volunteered to come here. We don't acknowledge that you have the capacity to have us here. We've come here to try and assist, and we're going to give you the information you need. So,
now this is supposed to be a hearing to try and keep them honest, but Brad Hazard here, he doesn't feel that he needs to answer any questions. He feels that he's turning up as a volunteer because he's a nice guy. He's giving attitude to the people asking questions. And those people, the question that Penny Sharp here asked was directed to our so-called health professional here, Kerry Chant. We'll get to her later on. But we've covered Gladys. Now we're covering the attitude of Brad Hazard. He's acting like the king or some sort of a authoritarian leader that doesn't have to answer to anyone. He thinks that he's turning up as if he's a volunteer. That's not how democracy works. Well, as far as I would know, democracy, there's supposed to be a lot of transparency. You get voted in by us, you answer to us, and if you do something that we don't appreciate you doing, you have to answer for that. But he doesn't see that. He says, oh, we're in the middle of a crisis, and so therefore I don't have to answer you. I'm here volunteering. That's the behavior of a king.
You might
and the question was put to Dr. Chant, and if you would allow Dr. Chant
I will answer the question that I'm now talking about, thank you. I mean, not up to you to determine who's going to answer the questions. I'm the minister, and I'll answer it.
I've always taken pride that the New South Wales government is honest and upfront with our citizens.
I thought that was a relevant bit to put in. They're not honest at all. Now we'll get on to Kerry, our health professional.
We need to hold the course. We all have a part to play in getting through this, and that the path forward is a combination of remaining at home and staying at home. Every time you leave the house, ensuring that you believe that you're coming into contact with someone with COVID. So do not interact with others. Do not have conversations when you're meeting up with people in the supermarket that you know. This is a time, if we all act
We're not all in this together. I think most people locked at home are aware of that. If we have a look here, a woman in her 90s died at Liverpool Hospital. That's a banner. That's a thing. Is that really a thing? A 1,000,000-year-old person died, and we're supposed to believe that it's COVID. Like a 90-year-old woman would die at hospital if there was a storm outside.
Diligently to make sure that we don't have any contact with anyone outside our household. It will help us get on top of this. Also, as we've seen, the greatest risk is the household. So again, I know...
Hang on, you're contradicting yourself here. If the greatest risk is the household, then why are we being locked indoors. My understanding also is that exercising outside and social distancing, there's less transmission outside. Most of it is indoors. So by locking people indoors, more people indoors, especially in apartment blocks, elevators, etc., you're spreading it more. You're more likely to spread it under those conditions. And so a lot of this advice doesn't really make sense. It's let's just continue.
That you do want to take the opportunity to visit other people, but please do not. This is too critical to protect you and your loved ones to stay at home. And my other key message is get vaccinated. And also, whenever you have symptoms, get tested. We're still seeing people that have been in workplaces for a number of days whilst infectious.
And those people have bills to pay, Kerry. We're not all sitting on $500,000 a year living in an ivory tower. This is something that people can't stop. And there's a big issue with the Australian people is whenever we see someone seeming to be breaking one of our made-up rules, the Australian people seem to just jump on and want to pile in on some innocent person. This is where Today Tonight and The Current Affair get all of their power, and the shock jocks that we have in Australia. And this is partially why around 2018 I started to become really angry online, is because I thought that people were far more rational and cared about others' freedoms. That's America. That's not Australia. The Australian people love a good witch hunt. They love a good burning of an innocent person for no reason at all. You have the media go on witch hunts. You have a Current Affair chasing people down the street. This is the real Australian psyche, and it is something that makes us easily flip into an authoritarian state because people just, this person did something wrong, let's burn them at the stake for literally no reason. We need a Bill of Rights. We need some sort of a rights that are enforced, and we need to change the way people think. The Australian people need to stop piling in and attacking each other for ridiculous things, a Current Affair style. And they need to stand up and go, hang on, let's stand up for this person who I don't know's rights. Let's stand up for each other's rights. Because this is how the Soviet Union controlled them. They dobbed in their neighbors. They dobbed in each other. This is how the Soviet Union got control. Everyone was just dobbing each other in. And nobody stood up for anybody's rights. On top of that, in the Soviet Union, the police were given orders, and the police just were like, I guess I got to do what I'm told. Those orders can become murder. That's what the Nazis did. There's been studies. Police officers that are given orders to just shoot to death a pregnant woman in the street that's not wearing a mask will most probably do that. And that is me stepping a few steps ahead. But I've not seen one police officer in Australia stand up for anyone's human rights. That's a sign of Australian society. In America, they do. The American police, they step back and they say, hang on, this goes against this innocent person's rights. I'm not going to do what my sergeant or my government told me to do because I believe in human rights. I believe in their right as an individual, right? We don't have that in Australia. The Australian people, this country has always been literally the keys in the ignition. All you have to do is turn it and it'll become a communist, socialist, authoritarian regime overnight. And that is partially why a lot of the Chinese money coming into Australia was a huge issue for me. but I would also talk about how we had these major domestic problems. We got a lot to cover, by the way. I understand if you guys lose track of what I'm talking about, but I'm going to cover a lot of ground in this video. Let's see if she has anything else to say. Look, just because she has a PhD doesn't mean she's smart, okay?
And that poses a risk to that workplace, and also will then lead to the introduction into another set of households and trigger further transmission. So
yeah, I think that's the problem with me. Saying something simple like what she just said, I just can't do it. It's just way too simplistic. I jump ahead too much. Now these are the rules, okay? 9 p.m. to 5 p.m. Now this is the curfew rule. I want to tackle this first. Now we have off-peak and peak hour electricity. When too many people are using the electricity, it can overload the system, right? So it costs more to use electricity during the peaks, right? The same as public transport. When, say, 9 a.m. in the morning, or 8 a.m. in the morning when everyone's trying to get to work, or 5 p.m. in the afternoon when everyone's trying to leave work, in the city, the public transport is overloaded, so it's more expensive to try and discourage people from overloading the public transport. Not to mention the fact that you have to wait a long time, there's more people, you're jammed into, it creates a bottleneck, the peak hours, especially all over the world. It's not just Sydney, it's Melbourne, all over the world. Now, what I was doing in the early stages, and how dare I think for myself, you guys are aware that I like to think for myself, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. You know what I was doing in the early days of this lockdown? Sure, I don't want to catch COVID. The reason why I don't want to catch COVID is because I'll get locked down for 2 weeks and lose more of my rights, okay? So what I was doing was I was sleeping the majority of the day. And I would go out late at night, which means that when I go out my front door, everyone's sleeping, right? When I would go to whatever store was open late at night, like a 7-Eleven, there's no one in the 7-Eleven. The risks of me catching a virus when there's nobody awake is almost zero. If I'm wearing a mask, I'll wash my hands, there's no one around, right? If I don't touch any surfaces. So what I was doing by staying up late at night and then going and hitting the park at 2 a.m. and doing push-ups and sit-ups and, just exercising in the park, which I was doing, I was one less person that was hitting Coles and Woolworths in a peak hour and increasing the probability of spreading this virus. Sorry for talking common sense here, but if we were to spread ourselves out over the 24-hour period, there'd be less people bottlenecking in any one area at any one time, which would reduce the amount of spread. Sorry for speaking common sense. The amount of times at 1, 2, 3 a.m. in the morning an undercover police officer from this authoritarian state would come over and harass me in the street and ask me where I'm going, didn't really connect with this. Where am I going? I'm like, there's nobody out. Am I a risk to society? I'm not outside of my 5-kilometer authoritarian radius. Why are you harassing me? Well, it's a police state. See, that the police don't care about your rights. They're here to take your rights. It's not about health. It's not about spreading the virus. They don't care about that. One person walking around late at night is not spreading a virus. Right? So this here, if you take what I just said, this is creating a bottleneck. That means around 7 o'clock at night, 8 p.m. at night, people start thinking, oh, okay, what do I need to buy? Okay, what do I got? I got to get milk. I got to get some steak. I got to get some vegetables for dinner. Oh, what am I going to have for breakfast? I better go. And next thing you know, 7, 8, 9 p.m. at night, Coles and Woolworths are swamped with people. So you've created a bottleneck because of the curfew. You're cramming more people into a confined area in the shop at one time, and you're increasing the rate of transmission because you created a curfew. Now, the curfew, when you look at it from my point of view, from just common sense here, that creates a bottleneck. So why are they doing it? I'm trying to stop myself jumping ahead, and this is something that I've been doing for many years. I just look at something like this. I don't break it down in simplistic fashion like I just did to you guys just then. I just leap ahead and say, this is control. This is authoritarian. This is to reduce the amount of people buying things. This is to control you and watch where you go. And when I do that and I jump ahead and I say that without explaining what I did about this creating a bottleneck and actually increasing transmission of the virus, people just think I'm crazy. I'm going to try not to do that in the future. I jump ahead. This is why I just come to the answer. Now, this next one I'm going to tackle as well. 1 hour exercise per day. Now, exercising outside, unless you're coming in contact with other people, and there's trees around you running through the park by yourself, you're not spreading any virus anywhere. If you don't have it, you're not spreading it, okay? Now, this 1 hour, why would they do that to you, okay? Considering that we are very much aware that obese people, overweight people, people with comorbidities are more likely to die from COVID than healthy, fit people. And I'm going to cite some scientific articles and some proper research that happened last year to back up my claims here. Now, one hour, people are getting fat. Everybody I know that I've spoken to over the last year and a half has put on weight. Now, if overweight people, and that doesn't mean that healthy people don't get sick or have symptoms or die from this virus. I'm not saying that. They're the outliers. It's the same as when the mainstream media, one lady in her 30s died from COVID. And so she's the poster child for lockdowns. When if you look at the data, she's the only person that died in her 30s. So they skew it, and then you start to think, what's their agenda? But we're going to cover that in a minute. 1 hour exercise. What are they actually doing, okay? Why are they... We're going to get back to both of these, okay? I'm going to use... This is all connected, so let's move on to the next one. So when we have a look at these cases, if you guys want me to go through some of these comments, I can make a video, because some of these comments are just outrageous. The comments in here, some of them are just so funny that there's a whole video in itself just reading the comments from people. So 1,000 cases. There's people asking who's recovered. Well, it's pretty simple. So you got people in hospital, ICU, right? And then total deaths. Let's just say 1,000. Let's just round it up. So 20,000. Just round it up. 20,000 people have recovered. That's pretty much it. People are asking for a recovery box. But no one's asked for something that I would like to put on here, which I think is the most powerful box. I'd like to have a box here called asymptomatic cases. And yes, I'm aware they could never get those asymptomatic cases for us. A lot of people, they catch COVID without any symptoms. There's a huge amount of people that have caught it, have not been tested. They didn't know they caught it. They didn't get tested, so no one knows that they caught it, and it spread. Now, how many of those people are in Australia? Who knows? Countless people. 20,000 is a very conservative estimate. So when you're looking at the total deaths compared to the total cases, and you're calculating that it's like 98, 90, 99% recovery rate, and you're saying that that is good, right? So the recovery rate's already good with the data that we have. If you add the extra box of asymptomatic cases, which we can only get if we simultaneously test every single Australian within 1 hour, and we get a proper number of how many people are actually carrying it, even the asymptomatic cases, that 90, 98, 99% recovery rate will increase to 99.99999 when you realize that the vast majority of people are catching this and recovering. And those asymptomatic cases, that will just blow this out of the water. That's the bit of data that they don't want to talk about. And that's when I go through all these comments, no one says asymptomatic cases. No one. Everyone talks about a lot of irrelevant data. But when I look at this, asymptomatic cases is missing, which says that, obviously it doesn't fit the narrative. There should be at least a little bit of a disclaimer here. But that's not how Australia works. I guess because we don't have a lot of free-thinking people. Mainstream media has, kind of brainwashed people. So let's move a little bit further on. Cases by age and sex. 20 to 29. So we can pretty much say 20 to 40-year-olds, they're the majority of people catching this virus. Now deaths, if we go down here, from all the way up to say 50 or 60, I don't think this is even counted, to be honest. There's not even 50 to 60-year-olds. Even 60 isn't really counted over the last year and a half. It's really only 70s. Now, when you look at the cases up here, there's only a few people catching it. There's a huge amount of deaths. Is that because the virus is really deadly, or because these people are just old? It's because they're old, okay? If everybody in here is catching the virus and nobody's dying from it, also there's another box that we need here, which is missing. People who have long-term health side effects from catching the virus. This is something no one's talking about either. So if someone has caught it here, they didn't die, there's no data here to show me who they are up here, showing me, okay, well, all of these 20 to 30-year-olds now have problems with breathing, they have headaches, conjunctivitis, they have some sort of illness that is an ongoing illness that they are going to have to live with for the rest of their life due to catching it. If you can provide that, then this will become a lot more real to me. And the reason that they have not showed that makes me believe that there isn't any long-term side effects. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't, I'm just saying that the data's not here. And if the point of this data is to prove to me that this virus can be very dangerous for people within this age range, I need that box with a bunch of people that have long-term illnesses due to catching it. Otherwise, if this is the only two graphs that they're showing me, I can only assume that all of these people down here, because they're not dying, are recovering fully and having no long-term side effects. Maybe in the next couple of years we'll find out if they did or not. Maybe it's too early to say. Sure, I get that. But there should be something over after a year and a half. Let's move on. Now, the leading causes of death in Australia, 2008 to 2018. Now, when I go through this, coronary heart disease, lung cancer, whoops, I think I clicked on it, dementia, pulmonary disease, that's the heart. You go through the list. Diabetes, it's connected to being overweight. These are all the leading causes of death, and suicide's down here, all the way up to 2008. I also found quite a lot of data that showed that there was a correlation between Australia's economy, the decline in Australia's economy since the global financial crisis through to now, or as close to now. There's been an increase. So the decrease in our economy, there's been an increase in deaths due to suicide. As you can see, it's gone up. And just an overall increase in deaths. As you can see, it has gone. Whoa, hang on. That can't be right. No, that one's gone down, but suicide has gone up. Sorry. This one's gone down. Now, if the government, when you have a look at the top, these are the around 2015, coronary heart disease, lung cancer, suicide, stroke, dementia, bowel cancer. A lot of these are connected to being overweight. And what happened there? Don't tell me I accidentally clicked on it. Okay. So as you can see, these are the leading causes of death. Now, if you want to lock people down under curfew and give them 1 hour exercise, you're increasing the probability of them putting on weight, and you're increasing the probability of mental illness. Putting on weight increases the chances of coronary heart disease and stroke. You could say bowel cancer, pulmonary disease. They're all connected. Also, locking people inside increases depression, which increases the suicide rate, which everybody's talked about. Dementia. People dying from dementia is a huge problem in Australia. Now, locking people up, they're more likely to become suicidal from depression and develop dementia and forget where they are, right? Because they're locked up. They're not communicating with other people. It's isolation. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to go through, this is just me saying that, but let's go through and have a look. I just want to back it up. Here we go. So, okay, so this is I should have put this, I should have mixed this up actually. These are the 3 science articles that I want to cover. But let's just back up my claim that obesity contributes to heart disease. Now, if you're being locked up, you're not doing any exercise, they've shut down the gyms, you're not allowed to go outside pretty much at all and exercise, and if you do, the police are going to harass you, then you're going to put on weight. I've put on weight. Everybody I know has put on weight as well. If you're putting on weight, it contributes to heart disease, and heart disease, coronary heart disease, is one of the leading causes of death in Australia. Now, if a so-called health professional wants to protect you from a virus that mainly only kills grannies that were going to die anyway, while locking you inside to make you get fat, all she's going to do is contribute to this. You see? Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical professional. I'm just a hack that knows how to use Google and can read and understand data. There's a direct connection between locking people down, curfews, 1 hour exercise, putting on weight, and increasing the death rate in Australia. Stroke, bowel cancer, pulmonary disease. It's all connected. So if I was to be a crazy conspiracy theorist, I would make the assumption that she's trying to kill you. It sounds outrageous, but when you piece together this with this and this, That's exactly what she's doing. Right? Am I wrong? Am I looking at that? I feel like I'm crazy looking at this, and I feel like I'm the only one that's seeing this. When we've got this fool, this fool here, and this fool, which is pretty much a criminal, all telling us that locking us down is going to help us. That's just making us fat. And here we go. There we go. Oh, beautiful. There's no denying fact that obesity has been on the rise in America. Okay. It's been proven to make life. It also comes with much more serious issues. Heart disease. Obesity and heart disease. You can go through it. Maybe I can put all these links in the description. Now, obesity is generally caused by eating too much and moving too little. If you're not allowed to move, well, and you're stuck inside and there's nothing else to do, a lot of people end up eating more than they would like to and moving less. Yeah, physical activity. And then it's stored as body fat. And that's... So there we go. Physical inactivity. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Now, United Nations human rights. We don't have human rights in Australia, and this is not me exaggerating. Australia is not a country that believes in human rights. Neither of these three people believe in human rights. When we have a look at this, the fact that you're under a curfew, the fact that you're locked down, the fact that you have a 5-kilometer radius, how many Australians, the unspoken majority, the unheard majority, are locked inside right now, have no one to speak to other than on a device like a phone or on a laptop. Every time they go outside, they have to wear a mask. They're not allowed to speak to people. Kerry Chant actually told us, don't speak to people. You're not allowed to go visit friends or family. You're effectively being isolated. Okay. Now, according to the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, if we have a look through here, solitary confinement amounts to psychological torture. Right now, my personal situation right now, I'm under solitary confinement. I'm not an isolated I'm not the only person that is isolated. Everybody's isolated right now. Everybody in Melbourne, everybody in Sydney, there's millions of people under lockdown right now. Right now, I don't have access to any friends, any family, anybody. I got no access to anybody. There's no one I can hang out with. I'm literally isolated in my own apartment due to this police state. Okay? So, technically, I'm under solitary confinement. And, according to the United Nations for Human Rights, this is psychological torture. Now, whether you agree with me or not that this is psychological torture will determine whether you will go with the rest of what I'm going to say here, okay? I believe that this is psychological torture. I believe that right now I'm being tortured. I'm being forced to isolate, solitary confinement. And I believe that they're breaking my so-called human rights. But we all know that Australia is a lawless society. Okay. Mental and physical health are interconnected. Social isolations, adverse consequences range from sleeplessness to reduced immune function. This is pretty damning stuff. Now, if you've isolated someone, they're having loneliness is associated with higher anxiety, depression, and suicide rates. Now, what we have here, remember this, reduced immune function and higher suicide rates. Okay? Now, when we go up here, over here, suicide, we are all aware, is on the rise. But Kerry Chant is trying to tell us that she's trying to protect us from a virus. Now, we go back to the very beginning of this video where I asked you guys to make an assumption. If you believe in my assumption that there's no escape from this virus, there's no escape, in my opinion. Reduced immune function is going to reduce your ability to fight it when you eventually catch it. Okay? Now, you might assume that you haven't already caught it, but I would put money on it that you already have, because we don't have that asymptomatic case box. There's a very good chance that you've already caught it. Okay? Now, the people who now are being isolated and the virus is not necessarily spreading so far, their immune function, if that's a word, if that's a way to explain it, is reducing, and the suicide rates. So, if she thinks that she's out to protect you, it would seem that if she's a doctor, now I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, I'm just someone that reads. Now let's assume that she has, and she should, she's got a PhD, she understands, she's Dr. Kerry Chant. She will understand this. She would also understand this. She would understand that it reduces your immune function, increases the likelihood of suicide. Now, if she understands this, she understands the death rate, she understands just the common sense that I pointed out with isolation and increasing obesity. Where is it? Here. It contributes to obesity. If she knows all those things, then wouldn't her advice be doing the total opposite that she's trying to tell you? Now, what would I know? I'm not a doctor. But if everything that I've pointed out to you guys is correct so far, and we haven't even got to the scientific articles, there's some damning stuff coming, then she, in cahoots with him, in cahoots with this person who I can vouch for, I don't have access to a court. There's no way I can get into a court, into a lawless society like Australia. So she would have faced me in court in one day if I had access to a court. I know she doesn't care about people's rights. If these people are all in cahoots, and she understands what I just ran through, that this creates this creates obesity, that increases the death rate, and that this isolation, she wouldn't know this because they don't care about human rights, reduces your immune function and increases the suicide rate, which will definitely contribute to this dementia as well, then her advice is actually going to kill more people than it's going to save. But what would I know? I'm not a doctor. Let's move on to the next one. Effects of social isolation and loneliness. Now, this is university, public health, and medicine. It's not a hack blog from some hack, okay? A study led by epidemiologist at Newcastle University concluded the deficiencies in social relationships associated with higher risk of coronary heart disease and stroke. By isolating someone and creating loneliness, you increase what is already our largest killer in Australia. This kills more people than anything else, coronary heart disease. Shouldn't she know that? And shouldn't she know that if this is already our largest killer, that science has proven that self-isolation and loneliness increases the probability of coronary heart disease and stroke? Stroke and coronary heart disease. Let's increase those rates. You see what I'm saying here? This is a university, some university medicine. A study published. I can go through these. I actually read quite a lot of these, by the way. Now there's a reason, like I read all of these, okay? I got to this point and there's a reason why I brought up this one, coronary heart disease and stroke, because it's connected directly to our already bad enough death rate. And then I brought up this one, dementia. See, a study published in the journals of, I can't pronounce that, concluded that loneliness was associated with a 40% increased risk of dementia. Dementia's already here. We're increasing the rate of dementia and coronary heart disease and suicide by locking down the country. Now, wouldn't she have learnt that, seeing as she's a doctor? Now, if she's already learnt that as a doctor, then wouldn't that mean, now I'm making a huge assumption here, that she's deliberately trying to increase the death rate in Australia? The data's clear. This is clear. This is clear stuff. Not to mention the human rights stuff. Let's move on. We do have some winners though. Lucky, we've got some lucky winners here. And this is only, I tried to make this video as short and sweet as possible. I can talk for hours. Trust me, I'm under lockdown. I got a lot to cover. And this is an issue of mine, which I'm trying to correct. I need to spell out how I come to my assumptions, and explain A, B, C, D, how I get to my assumptions. This is why a lot of the times things have happened where I've seen them coming. I don't explain that I put in the work in the background, okay? There's a connection here. Australia records highest month in history for alcohol. This is December, so it says December. There's been increased there's been an increase of $3.3 billion in alcohol sales, which is 26.7%. Now, I'm not going to go through and show you several different links explaining that alcohol contributes to this, it contributes to this, contributes to this, it contributes to this. I even read a study saying that alcohol contributes to bowel cancer. What a surprise that's there. It continues to this. It would seem that alcohol is also while being isolated, because what do you think happens when people are isolated? They're lonely, they're undergoing torture. How do they deal with it? Alcohol. Okay, now I will say that this one here, lung cancer, these rates have apparently been dropping. And I couldn't find any data on tobacco sales in Australia for 2020. I couldn't find any data. Maybe if you guys can find it, it'll be interesting to know what's going on there. Maybe instead of just people smoking more, they just turn to alcohol to deal with what is going on. Now, I think that gives you guys a fair enough picture as to how I see what's going on. Okay. So let's move on to some studies. Now, this is the first study. Now, these are journals, okay? These are journals of clinical medicine. These are proper journals written by doctors. These are all doctors. They're all got PhDs, and they're not just doctors like this one. They're doctors in research. They're doctors at the cutting edge of what's going on. Okay, now this article here, it's a real science article. Physical activity and the risk of COVID-19 infection and mortality, nationwide population-based control study. This was done in South Korea. When I went through, the sample size was not very large. And the controls, there weren't a lot of people who had been vaccinated controls, and people that it wasn't as comprehensive as I would have liked it to have been, but some of the conclusions to this study were very, very positive when it comes to physical activity and the risk of COVID-19 infection. What I discovered by going through all of this, which I can assume that you guys are aware of already, is that locking down people, making them overweight, this tells you that increases the death rate, and that healthy people, I'm literally reading this. I can't remember exactly where. There's the title. How about I leave a link in the description for this one. National Library of Medicine. Also another legit one. This is exactly the same study. Let's see. Determine the potential associations between physical activity and the risk of SARS-CoV-2 infection. Severe illness from COVID-19. So it was a nationwide cohort from South Korea. Okay. Now the data has 212,000 Korean adults. Okay. Who tested for COVID from the 1st of January 2020 all the way through to May. I'm going to leave links to this so you guys can actually go through it in depth. Adults who engaged in both aerobic and muscle strengthening activities according to 2018 physical activity guidelines had a lower risk of SARS-CoV-2 infection. Those who engaged in insufficient aerobic and muscle strengthening activities Now, I want to go down and I want to show you something that I think it was here. Conflict of interests. I found there's a few of them. My understanding is also that this is not rigged like most science is. Most science has someone funds scientific research and then they come up with their own conclusions, to support what they were trying to achieve. So they hire some scientists to try and find something because they have an agenda already. My understanding is that these people, they did this for the greater good of society, not through any sort of rigged funding, which is rare these days. I think it was towards the bottom of this one that I found that. I think it's important to understand because I think that these three people have an agenda, and we haven't even got to that, by the way. I haven't even told you what I think's going on. So, no financial assistance and grant support have been provided for this project. There we go. They disclosed all of their financial and personal relationships. None of it was influenced. Okay? Which is very rare in science these days, because almost all of it is corrupted. Okay? Now let's go through the conclusion. Let's just go straight to the conclusion. It's heavy reading up there, by the way. But the conclusion, which you guys are already aware of, younger females are more frequently asymptomatic. Athletes can return to play after 2 asymptomatic weeks. I think that's very common in Australia. Healthy people catching it, not being aware that they've caught it. So, pretty much this one. Elite athletes, mild or without complications. They're not really having any troubles with catching COVID if they're healthy. Now, these are elite athletes, I know, and most of you guys are not elite athletes. You can go through, there's quite a lot here. 434 soccer players. Majority of them just experienced mild illness, while 23% were asymptomatic. Now, this is why when I come up here and I say, where's the asymptomatic box? It's not me just making it up for myself. It's me going to the science and I'm like, asymptomatic? I'm not a doctor, right? What is asymptomatic? Let's do a bit of research on what is asymptomatic. Let's read the science on this. So when I say that, that's just not my opinion. And a lot of people, they think that my opinions are just based on crazy conspiracy theories, but I gotta say, I can back up a lot of what I say in me butting my head against these type of complicated stuff. But this is important. A lot of healthy people are asymptomatic. It might be 1 in 4, whatever. That's a huge amount. Now, if we've got this many people that are sick, or a lot of these people have been sick, that's why they got tested in the first place. How many healthy people were asymptomatic? If this is the numbers. You see what I'm trying to say here? So, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these 3 articles in the description. This one, and this one. That's your homework. You can read that. And I think what that will do is that will be the science that makes her look like a fool for wanting to lock us down. It'll make... My argument for this, I think, is pretty good. It creates bottlenecks. And this is ridiculous. So if I was running the country, I would see, that's the thing. Like, if you have a look at this, well, you're trying to kill people. Effectively, this person, and this person. Now, they either are trying to kill you or something else is going on. Okay, I think these articles debunk everything. So why are we being locked down? Now, I came to this conclusion back in March, and I think we're right into the meat of this video where I can start to throw out some crazy stuff. So, Pfizer CEO says he's planning for vaccine-resistant COVID strain. He's confident company can react within months. This is August 2021. Now, okay, so, excuse me. I thought that the Pfizer jab would solve the problem. Apparently, we're going to need another one. And hasn't been developed yet. He's on the job. I also found an article that said that he was going to travel to Israel, but he was not allowed to enter Israel because he wasn't vaccinated. Yet that's right. That's exactly what I said. He hasn't taken his own vaccine. Okay? I think that's an important thing to bring up here. We're in the meat of this video, so this is some conspiracy type stuff, but I think it's Israeli news. I think it's like Jerusalem Times or something like that. They reported that the CEO of Pfizer could not enter Israel because he had not been vaccinated. They didn't let him in, which meant he had not taken his own vaccine. I think it's important to note that. So, why are you being locked down? I think that this is purely economic. I think that this is connected to what the United States is trying to do with slowing down the economies. They've always had a problem with creating inflation, and what they can do is they can lock you down, they can take away your job, they can get the political will by doing that as well. They can lock down the country, and they can tell you that China did it. So they get the political power there. They get the political will. Second aspect is, in a country like Australia, by taking away everybody's rights, taking away your job, taking away your ability, your freedom to even move, they weaken your mind. They reduce your ability to coordinate against the government. They reduce your ability to fight back, and they increase your reliance on the government. Proper socialist dystopian style. Now, you see, in a proper capitalist society, which is something that I've always wanted a meritocracy where I can trade, I can compete on the open market, and I can battle people in a proper capitalist way. I don't know too many people like me in Australia. I don't know hardly any of them that want that. Socialism has been something that the Australian people have always wanted, and now they've got it. because the majority of people are heavily reliant on the government, and the fact that the government is behaving the way that they are is just a natural byproduct of having more power. If everyone could earn their own money and had their own freedom to think and make their own money and do their own thing, and we had a smaller government, then they wouldn't have so much control over us. They wouldn't be able to put their police guns in our face and take away our rights and freedoms. But what has led to this lockdown and shutting down the economy is only going to increase, because we are more reliant on the government now than we were back in 2019. We were reliant on them then, but now that they forcibly took away our jobs and our rights and we allowed it to happen, oh, it's hilarious that people like the people that are pro lockdown, you guys have probably realized that my demeanor's changed a lot. I was angry 2020 because I thought that we could change. It's now too late. The only option is to get out of the country. My thoughts aren't really spreading. I'm lucky to get 1,000 views on this channel, so it doesn't really matter what I think. But we are now officially a socialist economy, where the majority of people are heavily reliant on money from the government, and then the government obviously has the right to tell you what to do. On top of that, the Australian people have no problem jumping on the bandwagon and vilifying any innocent person in the street that they perceive to have done anything wrong. A current affair can say this person littered, and the Australian people would literally get so angry and want to burn that person to death in town square. Just right in the center of the city. Let's burn this litterer to death because a current affair caught them doing something wrong. It's in our psyche. It is what I've noticed about the Australian people. We have no problem just burning innocent people at the stake like witch hunts. And because we're more reliant on the government, and the majority of people that I speak to are brainwashed by the media, they can't think. So when I speak to them, they just go, look, I don't understand what you're saying. And, well, I don't understand what they're saying as well. But we can't connect on anything. I struggle to connect with people who are brainwashed by the media. The media effectively is the brainwashing mechanism that has got us here as well. It's top down from the government. She pretends to be your mum and really care, and she fakes it. He's made it clear in this little discussion here that he's got no time for any sort of transparency. He doesn't care about you. And she's happy to go against what science is and increase over time the death rate due to her lockdowns. Now, if I was to make a decision on what we should be doing at this point, it would be come to terms with the fact that we need people to be able to fly in and out of this country regardless. If not, the continuation of the same that we're doing right now means that we can lock down the entire country, destroy everybody's lives, and we can get to zero again. We can do this. I'm not saying we can't. But then the next ship, it could be the next day, it could be the next week, it might even be the next month, is going to bring some more virus into the country. And does that mean we lock down again? Well, I'm the type of person that likes to look for solutions, not band-aids that kind of solve the problem short term and perpetuate long-term pain. I like to solve things fast and easy, right? And what we're doing here is we're avoiding short-term pain, but the disaster that's going to come over the over the horizon is going to be far worse than if we had have locked down opened up a long time ago. There are a lot of cases out there, like I would say, like Mexico, I would say Sweden. There's a few countries, and Britain has now eventually, after a lot of, like a year of turmoil, eventually said that they're going to deal with it. They're just going to open up. The Australian government and the Australian people are less intelligent than the British, and the British are really stupid. That's a huge thing to say, but history will prove me right. March 2020, all of the data was showing that we should just open up. I posted that in my Patreon. I can prove it. And the problem here is that it doesn't seem like we're going to do that. We are going to continuously push a vaccine that doesn't necessarily work, while simultaneously, over the next 5 to 10 years or 20 years, we've just increased the death rate for this. Suicide's already gone up, but the media only this is actually really, this is like an authoritarian state. The media loves to use a 90-year-old woman dying or some 30-year-old girl dying as their poster child for lockdowns. But not one media outlet has covered suicide from the lockdowns. I don't have access to that data. I don't know how many people have committed suicide. All I hear is everybody talking about it. One of my friends 2 days ago told me that they're suicidal. That they're actually considering and maybe even planning suicide. That person's outside of 5 kilometers of me. What do I do? I'm definitely not calling the police, because the authoritarian government cannot be trusted. Can't go to the hospitals. Might get locked up. So the suicide rate, people are now, they've got no protection. These lockdowns are killing people. You're putting on weight. It's increasing the death rates. Coronary heart disease, stroke. It's increasing suicide rates, dementia. Another thing that people have been talking about, I believe the guy was Dr. There's been some research into some of the vaccines recently saying that people who are being vaccinated when they are in the protected, the safe region here, they're healthy, they're under 40 or whatever, or under 50, under 60. The people who are being vaccinated here, these people would have been asymptomatic, majority would have. But being vaccinated has increased the probability of mutations of this virus. So the Delta strain and future strains are, from what I have read, a direct result of vaccinating people who didn't need to be vaccinated in the first place. But then we get back to here, where Gladys is saying that we need to vaccinate 70% of the population before we open up. Doesn't that go against everything that science is telling us? I can do an entire video. The reason why I didn't cover this one is because this would be a 5-hour video. But there's a lot of evidence out there now, and it's gaining momentum, that vaccinating people who should not be vaccinated, this group of people, has increased mutations and created new variants, and that's where the Delta strain came from. Vaccinated people, according to the science. Okay, so there's scientists out there actually doing research on it right now. I don't know. I don't know if it's true. I'd like to have a look at that before I make a video on it. This is something that cannot be proven. I'm not saying that it does create a extra variants, mutations, but I think when I have a look at this, I have a look at this, I have a look at this, not to mention your human rights. I have a look at this, I have a look at this, and then I have a look at this. I think that that's argument enough to open up. Now, why are you being locked down? I think it's economic. I think it's purely economic. And I think the reason why the government's becoming more of a socialist government and more authoritarian has nothing to do with a virus that looks like this. This is laughable when you think about it. It's amazing that the Australian people look at that and actually fall for that. This is the government website. This was given to you by the government and actually goes against lockdowns and how scary the virus is supposedly supposed to be. But when you have a look at this, the government's becoming more authoritarian. And I would say that it is because a lot of the people within Australia have connections and they're holding capital, they're holding assets within Australia. And these people come from countries like China. Now, the Australian government, this is what I believe, is preparing to seize the assets of as many foreign nationals within this country and assets that are owned by foreign nationals that might be connected to the CCP or even Russia, etc. And that's going to cause a massive stir within the country. When you take away someone's livelihood and then you take away all their assets, they might not just become suicidal, they might want to grab arms and attack the government, the police, fight back. Now, the government needs to prepare for that. So if the government is taking away everyone's rights and freedoms right now and getting the police used to squashing protesters and monitoring where everybody goes, monitoring everything everybody buys and sells, all of their movements. If the government, and I believe they will in the not too distant future, decides to start seizing assets from citizens that have connections to foreign nations like China, then they will be well prepared for dealing with the reactions of those citizens. So if you have a lot of Chinese people, there's 1 million in Australia, and they have connections to China, and the Australian government wants to seize all of their assets, and they want to get rowdy in the streets, then the police will be prepared for that. And they'll be able to track everywhere you go. You're obviously not connected to your friends or family, so you can't coordinate yourselves against the government. All of this is in line with the economic trauma that we're going to suffer over the near future. Australia's economy is on the decline. I don't think that we're ever going to get rich again. So 2015, when I was raving and ranting, I think we were in a boom. It was like we almost hit 1.2 or more trillion US dollars in GDP. We were wealthy back then, and now we're poor in comparison. China has put sanctions on us. China's going to refuse to buy things that they don't need to buy from us anymore. We're going to increase our military spending to protect our maritime trade as the United States becomes weaker in the region. So we have less money coming in, and we're going to have to spend more money just to keep the country afloat. Our wealth compared to nations nearby, like Indonesia, our comparative power compared to them is going to decrease. And what usually happens when you are a weaker country next to a wealthy country, a rising Indonesia and a falling Australia, the natural way of things is that the falling, reducing in power country like Australia naturally becomes more authoritarian. And it makes perfect sense, because they don't want all of the wealthy Australians to grab that currency, be able to spend it before it disappears into oblivion, because that's where the Australian dollar is going, by the way. They don't want you to sell your property and be able to get up and go somewhere where you can still use it. They don't want you to spend anything. They want you to stay at home and suffer the losses while the government plays economic miracle maker behind the scenes, gains more power, and make sure that they give themselves pay rises while the rest of us remain poor. If the way that I have predicted this going over the last several years is accurate, which I really hope it isn't, the government's going to get bigger and the middle class is going to disappear. There's just going to be pretty much a slave class in Australia. We're going to have to become a bit of a puppet state to America that is really poor, and the majority of Australians are going to get poor as a direct result of all of these geopolitical tensions. And if I was to warn you guys back in, say, 2017, 2018, in 2019, I started going crazy. If you had to listen to me back then, you had a lot more ability to make moves back then. Even in 2020, you had more ability to make moves than you have now. Your ability to make moves now is only going to decline next year, and so on and so forth, to the point where you don't really have any ability at all. So your freedoms and your economic, your ability to use the Australian dollar to leave the country, buy property abroad, sell your property and get out of here, is only going to decrease over time. A lot of people in this country don't really like being here. But I hope I'm totally wrong there. And that's probably another video. But I think I've ranted and raved for long enough. Where are we? An hour and a half. I think I've covered this. Lockdowns don't work. Lockdowns don't work. And hopefully I've pitched my case to that effect. Obviously, I have just whacked together a bunch of things. Thumbsing up this video and sharing it, that helps me. I don't know if I'll even make this video live. I think making if I don't get, say, 1,000 views, or I'm not really getting the support of you guys, it doesn't really justify doing this. It's not really worth it. I'm not selling a product or a service here. I'm just selling thoughts, and the more time I spend on these thoughts, the less time I spend making money for myself. And I think that is something that I need to think about a little bit more these days, because pointing out that this is just wrong isn't really going to change anything. And very little has changed since I've been doing these videos, except for my